Yeah, it's not about a civil matter, it's a criminal matter. Yeah. See if she does.
This time I'll call the meeting to order. Invocation.
Father God in heaven, we just thank you for this day. I thank you for this weather. I love this weather, so thank you. I pray for these people here and the leaders of this community in this town. And I pray that you bless them and bless their decision-making process and give them the knowledge and the foresight to bring this city forward. I pray this in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there changes we need to make to the agenda?
We do need to add an amending of the minutes under action items. I believe Stacy's that on the motion sheet. No,
I have
it's on that. It's on a separate sheet. Okay. So we can do that right next to when we approve the other minutes as well.
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
So moved by Commissioner Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Wentz to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to public comments. This is a time where citizens are encouraged to speak publicly. Request that you state your name and address, speak respectfully, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. This time we'll move on to discussion agendas. The sale of 330 West 6th Street.
And Commissioner, I have a gentleman here, and I'll let him introduce himself, but he'd like to just discuss the possibility of purchasing the house that we own at 330 West 6th, a big blue house, we call it, and perhaps moving it off. He has been trying to get a hold of a house mover that he's worked with in the past and moved to, but I'll let him introduce himself. And we put it on the agenda because we thought it might take more than 3 minutes for the public comments, but it's just kind of preliminary discussion, but it might be able to work out if you read my memo. So I'll let Mr. Park speak.
I'm Vernon Palmer. I live at Meltonville, just actually north of Meltonville. But anyway, I hope my 3 minutes is enough. Nobody likes a long-winded speaker. I've got some farm ground down there and I'd like to move this house down there if I can get all my ducks in a row. I looked at it with Bruno whenever we did the thing. I looked down the street and I thought, man, there's a lot of lines to be moved. So that is still part of the problem, I think. I ran into the mover, Leon Ball, the other day, and we didn't get down to the brass tacks of this. But if I can get a hold of him, which has been kind of difficult, I hope to have a better handle on what we can spend and not spend. I'd hate to spend as much moving lines as it would cost to move the house. The house moving might cost $30,000. I don't care about that, but moving lines isn't really of great benefit to anybody except the guy that wants his electricity to keep working while somebody's messing around. So if my 3 minutes are up, I'm willing to take a question or two, and I hope within a week or two we can have some better answers on this.
I'd love to see something happen to it other than just get torn down.
Yeah. That'd be good. So, Mayor Commissioners, I guess we're kind of waiting on Mr. Palmer to kind of figure out where he needs to be price-wise. We need to bring it back to you. We need to have commission approval for the sale. We'd have to have an agreed upon price, a sales contract, that sort of thing. The other thing that plays into this, when we put it into the memo, is the process that we're in with the greenhouse with eminent domain. And the timeline that Mr. Palmer's working toward could fit in very nicely with the same timeline that we're working toward for demolition of the greenhouse. So we are interested in trying to pursue a conversation, provided that the timeline works out with what we're doing. And our goal is to try to, an ultimate goal, if everything goes smoothly, is to have both houses gone, the ground level, the basements filled in, that sort of thing, before the end of this calendar year. That's our goal.
That's great.
if the timing can work out with his mover and that, it would save us a little bit of cost, and it would not leave us with an empty hole to deal with or have to worry about keeping barricaded or for several months, you know, if he were to like take the house, or the other side of it would be us waiting on him to get the darn house off of there. So that would have to be in the agreement somehow so that we can move in a timely fashion if we need to. So
Maybe some of the finer details to work out.
see what happens, and maybe come back to us with another timeline.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. I'll get out of here. Thank you. Good talking to you.
Okay.
Okay. So this week, burn up for this time, that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Moving on to the action agenda. First, we have a need to amend some minutes of previous meetings.
As your memo shows, I mistakenly omitted Commissioner Belden from 3 sets of minutes. Well, 4 if you count what I put in the packet this week. Thank you for noticing that, and I apologize for that. I did ask the league how we do it, how we handle it since the minutes have already been approved. They said we could just put it in one lump vote and just amend them. And then I'll just repost them. I'll reprint them off from my book and then repost them on the website and they'll be done. So set that I put in the packet, I've changed that, but you might want to note that that's as amended when you make your motion for that.
I move that we amend the minutes of May 5th, May 19th, and June 2nd to include Commissioner Belden as present.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Haas, seconded by Commissioner Hutchinson to amend the minutes of May 5th, May 19th, and June 2nd to include Commissioner Belden as present. They certainly were, so nice catch. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to the minutes of June 16th, 2021 meeting.
Move to approve the minutes from the June 16th, 2021 meeting as amended.
Second.
It's moved by Commissioner Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Hash to approve the minutes from June 16th, 2021 as amended. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to appropriation ordinance number 12.
Approve appropriation ordinance number 12. Second.
So moved by Commissioner Belden, second by Commissioner Wentz to approve appropriation ordinance number 12. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to ordinance 2021-3179, partial 20th Street vacation.
As you can see from the sketch by Campbell Johnson in the drawing, there's a piece of 20th Street right away south of the Catholic Cemetery, which I believe is known as the St. Concordia Cemetery. And they were looking to do some work here about, I don't know, a while back last year. I think me and Ronnie went out there and looked at some things. They had some questions for us, and we got to realize after we owned that block next to them for the runway extension that it appeared that the assumed property line of their fence wasn't where it didn't line up. So we got to looking at things, and it turned out they had quite a few gravestones in our actual street right away. And so we felt this was the best solution, just to vacate some and give it to them. And it still leaves us with a 68-foot wide right of way, which is interesting because the East Concordia, everything east of Matthew Street pretty much is only a 60-foot right of way width. I don't know why it was platted that way. They decided they didn't need as wide as streets, I guess. But so anyway, the recommendation from the Planning Commission would be to accept that ordinance and vacate that parcel bit of that street. Won't have to worry about paving overhead stones in the future.
Maybe a wise.
Where's Grandma?
There are places like that in the United States.
I move to approve ordinance 2021-3179.
Second,
It's been moved by Commissioner Wentz, second by Commissioner Hash to approve ordinance 2021-3179. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. I'm glad to live in a place that is not like that.
Now they can rest in peace.
Continue resting in peace. Government right away. Moving on to downtown alley project, change order number 2.
Mayor and Commissioners, this project seems to be plagued with change orders so far, but we're hopeful that this is the last one. We're crossing our fingers. We'll see what happens. The guys tell me don't be so optimistic, but I'm trying. This time we encountered some very wet soil conditions as we started to dig through the east alley, and we worked through several possible solutions. The contractor tried to dry the soil out on site. They tried to dry it out, I believe, off site a little bit. That still didn't work because of the really humid conditions, and then it would rain again on them. So what we ended up with the solution was our staff ended up hauling how many loads of dirt for them? 72. So we hauled out wet soil, and then we ended up hauling in soil from our borrow pit while the wet soil is drying out there in our borrow pit. And then hopefully when it's dry enough, we can pull it back in. But that helped keep the project moving along. This was a case of how do we come up with the most efficient cost solution, keep the project moving, but still making sure that we're making things as whole as possible. And so that was the solution. We appreciate our staff's willingness to work with the contractor and give up some of their time to help keep the project costs low. We ended up taking that first 200 feet and determining how much it would actually cost the contractor. We figured we donated our labor, we donated our soil. We're not looking for any cost back on that to ourselves, but just the cost to the contractor for the first 200 feet. Came up with some unit prices, estimated about how much might be happening in the next 2 alleys, and extrapolated that out and estimated $45,000 would be about what it would take if we encountered the same situation. The reason that's important for us to come up with a whole project cost is, again, to keep the project moving. We want to minimize the number of change orders. Theoretically, with a change order, you stop the work and you don't keep going. In this case, we said time is of the essence. We're already 8 weeks behind. They can't cover up any holes if we don't keep going, and so we did. The issue is can we still split the cost with CDBG? Well, the project budget allows it, but once we have total change orders go over the total cost of $50,000, we have to have CDBG's approval for them to pay their fair share. So right now this is under review by CDBG. So tonight what we're looking for is your approval to pay the contractor for that amount, understanding the conditions that we have, and that knowing that if CDBG approves it, then they're going to pay for their fair share. If CDBG does not approve payment for this for whatever reason, then we'll be on the hook for the whole thing. Had we not done this, we probably would have lost another 3 to 4 weeks trying to dry out soil to put it back in, and that would have been our only solution. If we do that, we lose the contractors for 3 to 4 weeks to another project, and then try to get them back to our project becomes a challenge as well. So those are the reasons we're kind of at where we're at. We will do a true up at the end of the project, and hopefully we won't have to take out as much wet soil in the next 2 blocks. If that's the case, we'll do a final deductive change order at the end of the project to bring it back in line. If we end up going over, then we'll have to come back and ask for more. That's just kind of, there'll be a true up later, but this is hopefully so we don't have to stop work in the future and we can just kind of go. So that's the reason for the language of the not to exceed language. Does that make sense? And the not to exceed is only associated with change order 2. On the second page of this memo, you can kind of see how our budget compares to actual so far. You can see that our local match percentage of this was to be 45.61%, and CDBG picks up the remaining 54.39%. On the right-hand column is kind of a breakdown of where our costs are, and you can see the values of change order 1 that you approved a few weeks ago, change order 2, and you can see comparing the left column to the right column, the budgeted allocation for this project was $1,032,686. And so far, even including change order 2, our total project expense is $885,153.50. So we're still well under budget theoretically for the whole project. And Kim's here to answer questions or add to conversation.
We anticipated the ground would be wet. We didn't anticipate digging up dirt with free water running out. And we can't put that back in because then we can't compact the soil and put pavement over it. And we had hoped that he'd be far enough into the alley when he discovered it, we could lay it out behind him and it would dry. It started right at Broadway and then went clear through to almost past Sherman-Williams before we got out of that. So we had almost 200 feet that was just absolutely slop in the bottom. Now, the result of that was probably because of storm sewer leaking over the years, pavement being cracked and taking water. Everybody's downspout in a business comes to the alley, drains into the alley, supposed to run down, go into the inlets. Well, if the inlets leak, if the pavement leaks, all that water goes in the soil. We're in a soil condition that the water doesn't go away. We're too close to the water table. So it just goes down and sits until we have an absolute drought year, and then eventually it disappears. So they have worked very diligently after the first kind of 2 weeks of trying to deal with the situation. And I just received their last accounting for that alley, and they're just over $10,000, and we anticipated 15. So we have a little cushion if we get into a worse situation. The middle block is one we're worried about the most. We know that had storm sewer through the whole thing. We know it leaked. We know that the soil is wet from Jeremy's digging to connect the sewer of the plaza in. We may need all that extra just to do that block. But as Amy said, only gets paid for what he does. He doesn't get the 45,000. He gets only what he puts in. So that's how we make it manage. Now, they're in Broadway right now, and they're going west with the idea that their street crew would be in the next week. Now, I don't know that's true, and I don't know I can hold them to that, other than the fact I told them if they weren't here before we got to the first manhole, which is right behind Mavericks, they can't do any more work in that block until they pave that street, because they promised us that's what they would do. So that's kind of where we're at. I anticipate that if now they have kind of a rhythm of how to do this, how to haul out, haul in, manage it with their own equipment as much as possible, I would anticipate that our costs will get under, unless we just run into some absolute horrible nightmare. I do not want to repeat this, but I will. At the very beginning, we said this would be a mess, and it's a mess. It's every bit as bad as we anticipated.
Well, it's not going to get better with time.
And our worst situation is we've had enough moisture to keep the water table fairly high, and so water doesn't go away. But when they keep working in that, most of the time when the guys come out of the trench, they're mud from head to toe. That's just the way they look, because the soil is so wet. Well, when we got to just behind Nutters in the east block, we ran into soil we could use all the way down to within a foot of the existing pipe. And we put it right back in the ditch behind it. But who knows? So they're pushing forward. He's grumbling a lot now because he anticipated he wouldn't be in that block, mid-block, until next week. And so now he's grumbling because we're going to have to shut off the splash. He puts a laser in the pipe and it shoots the grade of the new pipe. And when that water comes flushing through there, it pushes his laser out of the pipe and he has to crawl back down. I said, hey, that's 2 days away, deal with it. So.
I think you guys got that notice. We copied on the construction notice that was sent out to all the businesses that the splash pad will be closed for 2 to 3 weeks beginning July 12th. So Plaza staff's aware of that, so they are planning accordingly.
We rerouted the sewer line in the middle block. We moved over 4 feet to the south so we could miss another telephone manhole in Watershed that we didn't know we had in Broadway. And by doing that, he can actually get to that manhole, set up again, and then the splash pool can be on and there's no problem. But we got to get there. It's 200 feet away. Okay.
All in all, is our communication and I mean, is there good collaboration? Is this we're working pretty well together? Or
he works well as a contractor. He's like any contractor I ever worked with. The foreman's always looking for a way to make more money and grumble about why he isn't making money. That's just life. You
But
know,
they have been good on the problem solving side.
they have been real good about coming up with ideas of how to proceed. You have to push them. Just like anybody else who sets a price down, he'd like to make more money. And so you gotta push him to honor the original. I think if we'd hired Smoky Hill, we'd be in the same situation. So I don't think his competency is a question at all.
Good.
I move to approve change order number 2 to the downtown alley project with Orr Wyatt Streetscapes not to exceed $45,000.
Second.
So moved by Commissioner Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Belden to approve change order number 2 to the downtown alley project with Orr Wyatt Streetscapes not to exceed $45,000. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you, and we'll keep you posted on whether CDBG approves it to pay for their portion.
I would hope they would, seeing that the whole project is still under budget.
I would, from the indication from Amanda, she didn't think it'd be an issue, except it just had to go through the process.
Sure.
So we're not the highest one according to Amanda. One went over almost, it was $1 million, it went almost 2 million. And they were 101.75 in the original estimate, so they get paid up to the original estimate, but the funds they had, and then they had to pay the remaining. I mean, the worst thing about working in an existing situation that's been there a long time is 2 million. I can build you a building right out on a slab. I can see everything there. We can be real close. We get down 13 feet in the ground, 100 years old. It's another ballgame.
Absolutely. All right.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to repairs to Brown Grand Theater. Alternate number 3.
Mayor Commissioners, when we were talking with you at June 2nd commission meeting, we had a whole scope of repairs that needed to be done. And as we were going through things, Melissa informed me that we had forgotten or did not include some of the window painting. And so we're coming back asking for your approval to add that back in. That should complete the building envelope project. Melissa Swenson's here and she can kind of describe some of the details for that.
I will start by saying that in terms of timeline, we were hoping to be a little earlier or later this summer. But the Catholic Church, if you remember, we were having some cost savings if we went about the same time. They've actually had to push back to October because they're still trying to raise funds for their project. So they're looking to do us first before the church. So they're looking at mid to late May, early October, just to give you an update on timeline. And there was an oversight on the exterior of the east, west, and back side of the building, repainting the window frames. When they did the work last in 2016, they really focused a lot on the face of the building. So those windows and doors are in pretty good shape, but they said they would do any touch-ups they needed to the face while they're there. This estimate that you have in the alternate number 3 does include a lower cost for the paint because they will already have a lift here to do the rest of the work for the tuck pointing. So that bid came in at $5,387 for alternate number 3.
Was that the estimate from Royce that had painting for the windows? Is that interior?
Interior
Okay.
only, yeah. Mhm.
I move to accept alternate number 3 from Intercontinental Restoration for painting of exterior windows of the Brown Grand Theater building for $5,387.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Wentz, second by Commissioner Hash to approve or to accept, alternate number 3 from Mid-Continental Restoration for painting of exterior windows of the Brown Grand Theater building for $5,387. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you. I did have a couple other exciting news tidbits to pass along and share with you if I can have just a couple more minutes. I wanted to thank the commission for the new sidewalks and parking that has started out in front of the theater. We're doing one side at a time, so our entrance will remain open all summer, but it's going to look beautiful, and I just want to thank you for that. I also wanted to let you know, since April 1st, since I started, we've had over 447 people through the theater for historic tours. Last month, we had over 130 people for Missoula Children's Theater. And our 12 board members have volunteered over 200 hours of time this year so far for the theater. And the big news is we found out yesterday that we have received a grant from the U.S. Small Business Association as part of the $16 billion stimulus package for COVID relief. It was called the Shuttered Venues Operating Grant. We've received $14,830 for the theater to be expended this year. So I just wanted to let you guys know about our good news.
Great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to reports, managers report.
We're continuing to work with the 150th committee to kind of finalize things for the August 14th celebration and to conclude our work on September 25th for the Fall Fest. For the time capsule, we have until July 15th if you want to get an item in there. Most of what came out was a lot of letters to future selves, and so we definitely encourage all the commissioners to write a letter to your future commissioners. It'd be very cool for someone to open up in 50 years. We're excited, and we're hoping that as we work to find the owners of these new letters, which is underway right now, they can't have them till after August 14th because we want to display those letters. We'll display them in their envelopes because those letters are technically property of the next person. So we want to kind of treat them like the mail. We don't want to open them for people. We're hopeful that people, once they claim them, can share with us what's in them, because that would be really cool to see what's been written. But would encourage the commissioners to do that. Also, I know I've asked you a couple times. I'd love to ask you now on camera. One of the hopes that we have is that for the time capsule ceremony that evening of August 14th at 5:30, is that we want to do a slight, small reenactment of the original commission meeting that passed the ordinance that incorporated the city into a city. The Brown Grant Players does not have enough actors that are able to participate, and so I was wondering if you would want to put on your acting skills and be a part of that short, less than 5-minute script.
Sure.
No pressure, just let me know here by the end of the week or so.
On the 14th, you said.
It's a Saturday, and it's the same day as the celebration in the park. It would happen right before the meal.
14th of August.
Of August, okay. Yeah. So if you can let me know by the end of the week, that would help me to finalize the script and get things ready to go for that. So that'd be great. Less than 5 minutes, and you don't even have to memorize your lines. You can read your lines. You don't have to dress up in costume unless you want to. But,
Yes.
yeah. Are you gonna
I want to dress like a dude.
Yeah.
But there-
that's it.
Yes.
There really are going to be some exciting things that happen that day. We're really thankful for all of our volunteers that have worked hard for that. So everything from a car show to pickleball tournament to cornhole tournament, checkers, sand volleyball, basketball, bouncy houses for the kids, a pool party, the birthday cake and ice cream. The committee sampled the birthday cake last week and it was delicious. And we've already sampled the meat for the pulled pork sandwiches and it is wonderful. So it's going to be an excellent meal for everybody. We are working on fundraising efforts right now. We're waiting to hear back from a couple of grants to help us out with that. And then the committee did decide to solicit some donations from some longtime residents of the city of Concordia. And so those letters will be going out here this week. Other than that, we've been working on helping out Steve Richard and the Airport Advisory Board are also planning an air show for the same day as Fall Fest to coincide with the ribbon cutting of runway 1836. He called today and they've confirmed that they've raised enough money to have 2 aerial acrobatic folks there in addition to the Key State parachute team that will bring in the American flag. So it's going to be a very exciting time. And that'll happen in the afternoon. So typically a lot of the Fall Fest activities are in the morning and the evening. So this will kind of hit that time right in the middle at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It should be good. So we just need to work through a few of the details like parking or shuttles or something of that nature and to make sure that that works with Fall Fest so we don't take people away from downtown for very long. We want them to be able to get back and spend the time there. Other than that, that's all I have to report. Are there any questions?
Staff reports. All right. Commissioner comments? Marcia?
Fall Fest is moving, planning is moving along well. we discussed the air show yesterday at our meeting, so I think there'll be more going on that weekend. We probably can all take in, be able to take in a lot of different things. Hopefully, it's a lot bigger and better.
Well, speaking of bigger and better, the fireworks this year I thought were really great. And I had a guest here and they were very impressed. Because I had said bigger and better, and then, it took kind of a while to get things going. I don't know what the problem was, but it doesn't matter. It was very impressive. So I appreciate it.
And I don't have anything. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn to a study session to discuss the use of American Rescue Plan funds.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved by Commissioner Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Hash, to adjourn to a study session to discuss the use of ARPA funds. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
I'm sorry? What?
I'm trying.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Minutes, are we ready to jump right into this?
Let's just jump right in.
Okay. The memo that was in the original packet that was published Friday was one page. We added a couple pages to it this morning. So if you are able to get to the city's website and access it that way, I would encourage you to do so. The cover page the first page just addresses in generalities how this came to be. And you probably noticed I like to put my memos in that form because my brain cells don't always remember everything. And so when I go back to something, it helps me remember why we did what we did. So it's great. But the summary of that is that the city is going to be allocated $756,830 from the American Rescue Plan funds. We're called a non-entitlement cities. There are a summary of 4 separate eligible uses for these funds. So I feel like it's a little bit more restricted than the CARES Act funds that we got last year. Those eligible uses include to respond to a public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, or nonprofits, or to aid impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. Number 2 would be to respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID public health emergency by providing a premium pay to eligible workers. Number 3 would be for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year prior to the emergency, so 2019. Or number 4, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. We did receive some details from the U.S. Treasury to help us provide some guidance, because originally for a couple months, that was all we got. And so it was hard to know exactly how to use the funds. One thing that we learned last year is that if you jump in right away with the guidance that they issued first, you know that there's going to be rules and regulations that follow up later, and you don't want to mess up, because if you mess up in how you spend this federal money, you're on the hook for paying it back. So we want to kind of go slow and make sure we know what we're doing. So we received some guidance from the Treasury on May 10th, and then another FAQ page published on June 24th. So we've used those documents in addition to that interim final rule to kind of go through and figure out how each one of these areas would apply to us. And then we put in a staff recommendation for how we think the dollars could be used as a starting point for the conversation. And then commissioners, if you want to provide feedback, guidance on what you think, that's kind of the purpose of this study session. It should be noticed we do have until December 31st, 2024 to spend this money. So we don't have to work incredibly fast. We don't have to make major decisions tonight. But getting some guidance ahead of our budget study sessions next week, we really would be helpful. We also know that if we proceed with any of the infrastructure investments, like in water and sewer projects, we know that those can take 12 to 18 months from start to finish. So I think it's important, if we're going to do those, that we know fairly soon that that's what we want to do. Okay, so page 2 and 3 are basically our staff analysis, and then a recommendation at the end of page 3. And I'd kind of like to walk through these for viewers at home, because I know you probably haven't had a lot of time to take a look at this memo. With respect to the criteria to responding to the public health emergency and to help businesses and households, nonprofits, and specific industries like tourism, travel, and hospitality, we've outlined a few things just to kind of help jog our memories on what we have done so far. So last July, we were awarded $283,000 of CARES Act money, and that flowed through the county, and we had 6 months to spend all of that. And so what we used that for was to purchase additional personal protective equipment for staff, to purchase additional equipment in the ambulances, those Zolexes that would help in patient transport because they can monitor blood oxygen levels and heart rates and that sort of thing. And so we have one of those in each of our ambulances now. And then we also changed some procedures to help reduce the number of touch points. So we now go to an online registration for recreation programming. We now have a digital ticketing system for the police officers, for example. And as you know, we kind of remodeled this space and got different furniture that's more sanitizable. That's a word for the day, I guess, instead of the heavy fabric chairs that we couldn't sanitize as easy. So again, helping with cleaning efforts. Then we also worked with you on the Concordia revolving loan fund at the direction of the Department of Commerce. They urged us to take our revolving loan fund dollars, convert them into emergency loans, and later convert them into emergency grants to businesses to support their operations for emergency disaster relief. All in all, we did that. We converted those to grants, and we ordered 11 businesses in Concordia, a total of $249,500 to help out with their operations during the COVID-19 pandemic. Primarily that went for that month between March and April when everything was shut down. And then for the months following that, when they were restricted on how many people could be in the restaurants at a time, a lot of it went to restaurants. That money did have to work within that low to moderate income cap. And so that was a little bit challenging. In addition to that money, Cloud Corp had 2 separate pots of money that they were administering. One was also related to CDBG. It's called the CV1 Disaster Funds. And another was some CARES Act spark funds that came through the county. Of the CV1 dollars, $110,977 was awarded to 9 businesses, and $300,000 of the CARES Act spark funds was awarded to 22 businesses and nonprofits, all in Cloud County. Not 100% Concordia, but throughout Cloud County. And again, that was the same thing that went for operations and economic fallout due to COVID-19. Additionally, small businesses were also eligible to apply for payroll protection program forgivable loans through their financial institutions. Actually, I know you guys worked on them at Citizens, and there were several other banks in town that also offered those as well. And am I correct that most of those have been forgiven or in the process of being forgiven?
Yeah, you're midway through the second round. So they've not had one, they've had 2 rounds.
2 rounds of forgivable loans. So each business could apply for a couple. And help me refresh my memory what that money could be used for.
It can payroll.
Payroll, okay, that makes sense, it's in the title. So the effort to keep staff on when revenue was short coming in during that time. I think it's also important to note that we've done really, really well as a county and as a city. Since March 12th of 2020, our unemployment rate has fluctuated between 3.1% and 5.3%, which is well below national average and even stay below the state average, which is wonderful. This spring, our estimate is that there's 150 jobs currently available in Cloud County right now, with our unemployment rate at about 3.2%. That's about 196 folks seeking jobs. So we should be, there's plenty of jobs out there for the folks seeking jobs. And then we've also had 8 new businesses open in Concordia alone, and only one of those closed. And of the one that closed, one of them reopened, and that's included in the 8. So we're net positive businesses during a pandemic year, which is incredible. And all those businesses are still growing and going strong. So we're excited about that. The other thing, another way that we've helped out people is that in March of 2020, Governor Kelly issued an executive order that said we could not shut off people's utilities for non-payment due to the impact of COVID. The timing of that was interesting, particularly for us, because the day that she announced that, it was in an evening, and the very next day at 7 a.m. was a shut-off day for us. Normally, we have about 1% of our total meters that get shut off every year for non-payment, and for us, non-payment is month 1 was late, month 2 was late, month 3 they didn't try to catch up, they're off for month 3. So they've already been behind 2 payments. So that day, and we attribute it to this order, that number jumped up to 2%, or about 40 meters. And the reason it jumped, it sounds kind of weird, we normally have about 35 to 40 people on our list, and then the day of shut off, people will come in between 7 and 8 a.m. and drop that number down to about 20. Not one person showed up that next day. So that was interesting to us. But by May, we were back down to normal, and we stayed at a normal range since then. So that was very interesting to us. So people have been able to pay their water bills. We're really thankful to be in that position in this community. With respect to travel and tourism industry, I didn't get it written on here, but the Brown Brand, National Orphan Train, and Cloud County Tourism all benefited from some program to help with business continuity operations as well already. So those are things that we have. Any questions on that segment or what has been done so far to help out our community members? I guess I should go back I have it in here in the memo on the utility billing. Because we doubled our numbers that were on there, we did offer to each one of those folks a 6-month payment plan if they wanted to spread that payment out over 6 months. And of those 40 people that we offered it to, only one person took us up on that. So that was interesting.
Just no response from the others.
No response. So for criteria 2, which is to respond to workers performing essential work and providing premium pay, if I recall back last March, not a lot of the work that we do as a city can be done from home, and we're still expected to provide 24/7 coverage with respect to fire, EMS, and police. And we're also expected when there's a water main break to go out there and fix it. We're expected when there's snow on the ground to go out and scoop it, no matter what, pandemic or not. And so we did pay hazard pay or an overtime pay for those that had to work to start that out. Then we kind of backed off a little bit. We said, okay, let's bring back people half-time because we weren't sure how this virus was going to react, and we wanted to be able to preserve as much of our crews as possible. And we didn't want everybody to get sick at the same time, but we had to keep the work going. And then by the time we got to April, we realized that we were in this for the long haul, and we needed to get back to work. And so we put in some safety precautions here at work, and we're able to get back to work full time, and we stopped that overtime pay. So that's why it was such a short amount of time. Basically happened during the governor's stay-home orders, kind of when all that happened. So we incurred about $124,000 in overtime wages and benefits during that time. Originally, we had said we wanted to try to request reimbursement from that through the CARES Act funding. However, at that time, we had also received about $16,000 in federal funds. A check just showed up and arrived and said, put this toward EMS. So we put it toward those wages. Once we had done that, then the fire and EMS wages were out of the question. And then as the rules changed and were refined a little bit with that money, we found that we were told by the county that no, you could not request anything related to wages. Then that folds into items B and C on here as well. After that decision was made and we went another direction with the money that we were allocated, then we were told, yes, it could be done, but we chose not to backtrack because we'd already spent it on other things. Thinking that in the future, like in other disasters, eventually we'll have an offering from FEMA as long as we can document those hours to be able to request it back from FEMA. So far that hasn't happened because there's been these other relief packages that have come out. So anyway, keeping that in mind, then we also spent between March 13th and July 1, spent $20,000 in wages and benefit for COVID-related work. And this was our staff went out and helped the health department deliver quarantine orders. We helped post signage. We helped out with mobile testing sites. We helped out just with planning and policy drafting, the LAPC meetings, the ESFA meetings that were happening. We were part of those, and then just planning internally for what we needed to do. And then there was also, if you remember, the Federal Family Coronavirus Relief Act, which was anytime anybody was quarantined or ill during that time, employers had to pay wages and benefits as if they were working, even though that was non-productive time and it was separate from their sick leave and vacation. And that was in place until December 31st of 2020. So we ended up spending $16,358 in that. It doesn't sound like a lot, but recall during that time, we had all of our lifeguards, all of our concessions workers, and all of our umpires quarantined in addition to a few staff members. So the number was lower because they were seasonal workers and their wages were lower, but we still had a lot of staff out. So we were thinking, okay, well, maybe this ARP fund can be used to recover the cost of that. But as we read into the guidance, the ARP funds are forward-looking. And so anything that was done before March, any cost incurred by a city, by a local government prior to March 3rd, 2021 is not eligible. If we were to give assistance out to a third party, like to a business or a nonprofit, we can pay for their expenses incurred prior to March 3rd, 2021, but not our own. So we're not going to be able to recover these wages. It's disappointing, but as we'll see in the next segment, we actually still, even with those expenses, we still came out very well in our general fund this past year. So we're not at a huge revenue loss by any means. So if we don't recover those funds this year, we can handle it. So we move on to item number 3, provisions related to government services to the extent that we had a revenue reduction in 2020 compared to 2019. Well, we ended the year with our general fund receiving $104,793 more than we did in 2019, primarily due to strong collections in property taxes, including delinquent taxes, as well as a significant increase in sales tax collections that we believe was due to people staying home and shopping local more, which was great. We know our businesses benefited from that, and that was very good. So we cannot use ARP funds for any sort of revenue loss here. So the final category that we have to consider is making necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband. We know that we have a backlog. You've seen it in our CIP list, 10 to 15 years down. We've got plenty to do. I think Ron said it before, even if he had $1 million a year for streets, he still may not be caught up just for streets. We have a lot of area to take care of. So we were looking through what the guidance was on here, and lines A and B and C were directly copied and pasted from some of the guidance. So as far as water goes, we can do treatment, transmission, and distribution, including lead service line replacement, which we had a conversation this morning. And to our knowledge, there's no longer any lead service lines in Concordia. There are some lead joints, and Jeremy has a program in place where when they have a leak and they address it, if there's lead joints, they replace them right away. So that's already underway. Source rehabilitation and decontamination, which we don't need to take care of, thankfully. Storage consolidation and new systems development, which we don't have a need for, we're adequate right now. So the transmission and distribution is the part that we kind of highlighted and said, hey, that fits a category on our capital improvement list. Under B for the sanitary sewer, this is under the EPA's Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund categories. So construction of publicly owned treatment works, non-point source pollution management, National Estuary Program projects, decentralized wastewater treatment systems, stormwater systems, water conservation, efficiency and reuse measures, watershed pilot projects, energy efficiency for publicly owned treatment works, water reuse projects, security measures, publicly owned treatment works, and technical assistance to ensure compliance with the Clean Water Act. Well, thanks to yours and your previous, your predecessor's actions, we're in pretty good shape with our treatment plant. We're already underway with a project to get about as efficient as we possibly can. But as far as we're going to look at it as decentralized wastewater treatment system is going to be our lines that carry everything back, eventually get to a main, but carry everything back. That's our sanitary sewer lines, like what we're dealing with the downtown alley project. So as one example, we did find out, and Amanda confirmed that we could use these funds as a match to CDBG. So it is possible that we could reallocate the funds that were earmarked through CIP, through our water department funds, including the change orders that we have passed, or this most recent change order that's been passed, could reallocate those funds here and save our water department, save our CIP for other future projects. That is one option. Interestingly, as I read through some of the guidance on this, if there's already debt that was obligated prior to March 3rd of 2021, we can't use these funding. So while it could be used for the wastewater treatment plant, actually, I think this gets back to the question that you asked about the UV lighting. We couldn't use this fund to help pay down those bonds sooner because those bonds were obligated prior to March 3rd, 2021. Does that make sense?
But the UV machine wasn't.
Right. That wasn't, but the project was. So then the UV light, it could be in here, but staff is going to recommend to you that we not do that. And one of the reasons for that is that we talked with Dustin Navy, the bond counsel, and even though our bids came in under and we're well under the project bonds, the time the bonds hit, so we have that $4 million sitting in our account right now, and we can't touch it. We can't pay it down for 7 years. That's when the first refunding is. So we also got a 1.6% interest rate. And so we're paying interest on that money for 7 years until we can refund it. Our bids came in low, which was fabulous and favorable, but we would like to be able to put that money to work. We think that's a better way use of that money just than letting it sit there. And then once we hit that 7 years, then absolutely we agree, let's pay down if we're not using it. So we would like to continue to use that UV light piece in there, in those funds, as opposed to trying to put them into here. But we can go through and talk about that in more detail too. Another one in here that says Watershed pilot projects, and that was kind of exciting to us. Bruno and I had been in on a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and they're embarking on a Republican River watershed pilot project, which is taking a look at the floodplain on the Republican River again. And what's exciting to us about that is that if you'll recall, our Plum Road and 28th Street dams were put into place just after FEMA updated their maps. And FEMA was aware that we were building these dams, but for whatever reason, they went ahead with the mapping and did not include the effects of those dams. Since they've been constructed, we now have some more data through some work that Bruno has done with Campbell and Johnson with KLA, some point source data and elevations that we believe that we can do a map amendment. And the Kansas Department of Agriculture agrees with us that ours needs to be considered as part of this pilot project, and we could shrink our floodplain slightly, which would benefit some of our downtown commercial buildings. That first block on 6th Street from Lincoln to Broadway, it could positively impact those buildings, as well as some residents in the area as well. So we would propose that a portion of this money, whatever's left over from what we allocate, go ahead and put it toward that application fee if it's needed. We're thinking that it's very well possible with this pilot project that if we even have an application fee to redo our firm maps, it would be minimal and less than the $60,000 originally quoted to redo our firm maps. So since it's specifically stated, we'd like to take a look at that. As I said before, we've got a backlog of water and sewer infrastructure projects that we need to do. We did not look at broadband, and I don't have that on here, and that's because I know from talking with Cunningham, who's our primary provider here, they have had projects in the work for several years and are really working hard to continue their fiber to the home build out project. And they've been involved at the federal and state level to try to secure some other funding sources too to help them out. So they're already well underway with those things. So then we get to the bottom there, page 3, and that just kind of summarizes our recommendations. We talked about these this morning during department head meeting. So what we would propose is that a portion of this money go to pay for our local match. Our portion of the local match, so we said that CDBG paid 54%, we paid 46% roughly. Our 46% of the local match required for items related to the storm sewer and the sanitary sewer. We can't pay for items related to the paving. So the paving and subgrade to hold up that paving. So that comes out to $191,568.69. We know those costs fairly accurately right now. And then the other is that Republican River Watershed pilot, $14,992.15 ends up being kind of what's left over after we go through the rough estimates on the other items here. Next on our capital improvement list was a sanitary sewer replacement in the alley between 5th and 6th from State to Cedar. So that's the one that would be behind Rod's grocery store, that alley. Just one block there, and that's estimated at $150,000. And then we also have on our list next to be a water line replacement on Cedar Street from 6th to 11th Street. And the total estimated ballpark cost on that is about $400,000. And we have about $100,000 available here that we can partially allocate toward that project. There's nothing that says we have to do all 5 blocks at once, but this would get us down the road a little ways. Plus, if we're able to reallocate some of our existing water fund and CIP money by using this ARP money, then that's stuff that we can save. So a couple years down the road, we'll be able to match more, if that makes sense. We talked today about reserving a portion of the ARP funds for future essential employee premium pay, and the rationale for that is we know right now that we have a few variants of COVID out there. We don't yet know how they're really going to react and really going to impact the population, especially given vaccines that are going. But if we get into a point where it gets really bad, a more lethal variant comes out in the next 3 years, because again, we have till 2024 to spend this money, and EMS is still required to work in that type of a hazardous situation, we may need to pay them premium to make sure that we have those folks out there doing what they need to do. So this would just be a reserve out there. And then one of the things that we talked about too, under criteria number 1, it talked about assistance to households. And so we thought that there are a lot of programs out there right now for younger low-income folks. We have everything going on. The SNAP benefits have been extended to the end of this year at maximum level for grocery assistance. The extra $300 a week is still in play here, as far as I know, in Kansas, that federal money on top of the unemployment pay that's already there. We know that's impacting a lot of our frontline positions. We know that's probably why a lot of the restaurants are having to close their lobbies earlier, for example, because they're competing with unemployment pay at this point. We know that there is help out there for people with daycares. There's already been help out there for people that own businesses to keep them going, but we haven't seen a lot of assistance to low-income elderly residents, the ones that are still on Social Security that may not have extra disabled pay, that sort of thing. So we said, what if we, and we know that in our community, we have a high population of elderly residents. And in this case, we're defining elderly as above the age of 62 and on Social Security. The low income threshold is already defined at a certain level, and I apologize, I did not get what that would be for this year. Kim already has a form made up that they're using with the Federal Home Loan Bank housing rehab program that is an income verification form, so we could piggyback on that to use for income verification. But we said, what if we set aside $250,000? And based on our rough guess of what that population might be, we believe there might be 700 households that would need that assistance or would qualify for that assistance if everybody applied. And if we did it on a first come, first served basis, up to that max of 250,000, and then it was done, and with the income verification, with the age verification, we figured that was an easy way to do it. It would take additional work by our front office staff to collect that information, sift through that, do the income qualification, which I know takes a lot of extra work. If we chose to do that, all of the applicants would have to be set up as vendors in our system. So that would be, again, some additional administrative work on top of that, but it could be done. So anyway, that was one thought that we had as a way to help our folks out too. So those are the 6 recommendations that we have for the way to spend this $756,000 within the parameters as we know them right now. So open it up for discussion. What do you guys think? What do you want to see? Questions?
Well, like on number 6, would there be a limit to the amount you would give each individual?
Yes, we talked about $350, and I know it doesn't sound like much, but it is enough. We think that could be helpful. One of the things that the guidance had said was that you could, if you chose to do cash assistance to household, you could only give it to low to moderate income families. And they said the eligible items were just a flat cash assistance, or you could help out with their high electric and gas bills from the winter weather event in February 2021. I'm not sure what the nexus to COVID is on that, but it's that was one of the eligible things. And so we said let's keep it as broad as possible. So let's not just limit it to the bills, but and we also said that Kansas Gas was very generous and spread the extra out over 3 years. And so it was maybe roughly changing monthly bills by $6 to $12 or so a month. And I think that was on Prairie Land, and Kansas Gas didn't have much of an increase at all. So they weren't seeing much of an increase at all. So we weren't feeling like that was a huge need in our community at this point in time. I'm sorry, that was a long answer to your question. $350.
I think that redoing the map is important for the downtown area particularly.
I would agree. I think that we've looked at revisiting those maps, and cost has always been an issue. So if there's a pilot project and this gives us access to be able to look at that, I think it's
That's a good idea.
it'll be a benefit for the whole community.
And Bruno and I are going to go have a special meeting with them next Thursday in Manhattan, kind of meeting them halfway and taking our maps to visit with them. So we should know a little bit more after that meeting too.
I guess I would rather see most of the funds go to helping replace the water and sewer lines, because it's not picking winners or losers. It helps the entire community. So I understand the $250,000 for elderly residents, but I don't know. I think you do run a risk of I didn't get this, and you put the city in a situation where you are picking winners and losers, and that's not a fun game to play.
Right.
I think a bigger works projects that help the city move forward on their CIP list helps everyone and doesn't just pick out a certain group.
I would agree with Ashley. I think that there's certainly support, as I started thinking about it and see there being benefit, certainly a need for cash assistance. my mind's sort of going, so do we limit it specifically for utilities and food? Do we only provide vouchers for utility companies and our local grocery stores? Well, if we only provide food for grocery stores, you can also get food stuffs at gas stations. Do we include that on the list? Is that being too selective? And somebody said, or do you just write a check, then that we would presume would go back into our community? So I could see there being some economic investment, that these $350 is going to be essentially reinvested in our community that way, and there could be benefit there. But
Proof of residency, how long have you had to live there before, so it doesn't necessarily become a recruitment tool.
Right.
It's not intended for that, but it can become that.
It does seem to be a logistical challenge. I mean, honestly, that component, I understand what you're trying to accomplish, but I'm with you, Ashley. I think that, we probably have other projects that could use that.
And once that $350 is spent, I mean, I know it gets reinvested in our community. That makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. But then essentially it's gone. Whereas if we invest in infrastructure, then we have the potential to be able to maximize the
Saving
use of those
us
dollars.
down the road, yeah.
Or letting us do more with what we have.
Mhm.
Could it be used for the, I think it was Kathy Coleman. They got turned down for that grant or
Oh, for the
something
communications project.
Yeah.
Eric and I have had conversations about this because the Kansas Board of EMS, is that right, has been saying that yes, you can use it for stuff like that, but I haven't seen anywhere in the interim final rule and the guidance from the Treasury and the FAQ, there's been nothing on league meetings that says you can use it for those things. So basically what we summarized for you today is how we can use it. And I'm not seeing anything that says we can go for equipment for that kind of thing.
Since there's some
Yeah, there's a,
dead spots.
there's a need there, definitely.
Remind me what that cost was, is that $250,000?
200,000, I think, is that right, Rick?
Where we just redid the thing, but I don't have the amount in my head.
No, that's that ballpark, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not really about $2 million.
That's the whole project countywide.
And the 50,000 for essential employee premium pay, that has to be allocated before the end of the year, but it doesn't have to be spent for 3 years.
I'm not sure if it has to be allocated before the end of the year. What we need your decision on is if you want to do water sewer investment projects, do these seem like the right 3 to kind of pick and then massage as we go along because they match the CIP? How much do you want? What do we have left over? Then how do we do it? So 50,000 was just a random guesstimate of what might it take. And then if we don't use it there, then we can dump it back into one of the infrastructure projects.
That was my question, is if we don't end up, we've kind of been through our hump of COVID.
Yes.
So
There
We're
was,
not
there was some,
permanently allocating it to where now it just gets lost.
that's right, that's what I was hoping.
yeah, and so far what I've seen is that we don't have to have a specific use plan approved by the Treasury before we use it or by a certain deadline. I know that we have to have our application to the portal of the state, because our funds flow through the state. Application there has to be done before July 26th. And we haven't done that. We wanted to wait from you guys because you do have another option, and that is to give the money back in whole or in part. We don't have to spend it if we don't want to.
Have you found in your research, are there any clawbacks, anything that we need to be watching out for?
Nothing yet, but I need to go back through it in detail just to see. That's what makes me the most nervous. So if there's stuff that we can do that is, man, it's in black and white, right? Just copy and paste from your guidance. There's like the Watershed pilot project. Okay, there should be no clawback there because that is explicitly stated. Water distribution, there is no clawback there. That should be.
I meant more like stipulations that come afterwards. If you take this money, you have to then,
You
do
forego.
this. You have to jump up to $15 an hour minimum wage. You have, there's nothing like that in any.
I haven't seen anything
Okay.
of that nature yet, but we will definitely take a look at that so I can make sure that we're not gonna commit ourselves to something that we did not intend to commit ourselves to.
I think the logistics of clawing things back is gonna be cost prohibitive. That if we're giving out $100,000 for something, then for the government to go back and to audit and process with those $100,000 is probably gonna cost them $150,000.
It has happened with the COVID money though. It has happened with nonprofit entities here in town. It has happened, and it's been expensive, so.
I'm not at all dismissing.
A nightmare, yeah, but they're willing to play it.
So going into this with the best faith forward and trying to follow these stipulations, I guess my thought is, I think, getting it as close as we possibly can without trying to stretch things or to skew things puts us in as best of a position as we could find ourselves without there being explicit language that would indicate what those clawbacks would be. I mean, I don't know how we get it any closer or protecting ourselves more, if that makes sense.
We'll go back to the guidance of a fine tooth comb. We'll continue to watch the webinars that are offered. That's about all that we can do. And then knowing that each one of these individual projects is going to have to come back to you for individual approval. And so then at that time, we can say we've looked through this. It appears to be good. It should be fine. I guess the other thing to note too is this money comes in, if two, they call them tranches. They're going to distribute half the money now and then half a year from now too. So as we're planning these things, we want to make sure that we don't plan to overexpend this money before we get the second allocation.
Probably takes some time to print that.
Any questions or concerns then about what we've proposed? Does it all seem reasonable? I guess can I clarify? My understanding is that we don't want to do the cash assistance to low-income elderly residents. We would prefer to put it into infrastructure because that's a long-term investment in our community and we don't have to pick winners and losers.
Yes, I would say that it's not that we don't want to, because we certainly see the benefit of assisting those citizens in our community. Perhaps we see it being better allocated for grander infrastructure projects.
That would benefit the greater population.
Right. I don't know that you want Toby to have you on record saying you don't want to help.
Can we
that
edit?
Well, and the fact that water and sewer projects are not something people see,
Right.
you know, and you spend a lot of money on those projects, and I think using this money that is extra,
Yeah. It's bonus,
So to
it's bonus
speak.
money.
Well, I think it
helps everybody, and
puts us in a better position down the road.
All right, well, we'll do some reallocation and we'll keep combing through the information. And then as it comes back with each project, we'll bring that back to you and just confirm the questions on things, so.
I think it's a pretty good start.
Anything else on this topic then?
Good luck. I think we had like 100 interim final rules on PPP loans, and that was when we'd already reallocated the second group, so. Good luck.
A lot of nice weekend reading.
Oh, yeah. It's just nonstop. It's just creating the rules as they go. I mean, I understand why, but it's.
At some point economically, we're just gonna finally come to a point where we recognize that none of us read.
Yeah, I mean, we're there.
Anyway.
Thank you guys. Appreciate the
Our,
conversation.
our meeting on Monday, is that going to last all the afternoon?
Yeah, that's about 5 hours.
Great. Because I know you're.
Hey, I got you out of here early tonight. You gotta return the favor.